Tonight, it was my pleasure to interview the directors and producers of Finding Her Beat, a film about women artists in taiko drumming. My name is Jesus Solomon Olivares of the Hollywood Times, or Sully for short. What specific materials are in a taiko drum?
Oh, sure. Traditionally, taiko drums are made from one tree, from one piece of wood, where they carve it out and carve out smaller drums and smaller drums, kind of like a kokeshi doll, to get as many drums from one tree as possible. Those are quite expensive. They can run thousands of dollars. Another more modern version of making a drum is to take an unused wine barrel and to take apart the staves, sand it down, add some sound reinforcement, and glue it back together. And then cowhides go on either end, and they're stretched and then attached with steel tacks from Japan.
That makes sense. Cool. Why was it so difficult to play taiko in Japan, or what was their apprehension to letting women play?
Well, in Japan, traditionally, taiko was only played by men for thousands of years. And in the traditional sense, it was used as a way to speak to the gods, right? So it was in the shrines, it was in Shinto religious festivals, it was in Obon festivals. They even used it to tell time. But in modern days, that traditional use of the drums in festivals and shrines evolved to a performance art, to something you do on stage in a group, in an ensemble. And that style of taiko drumming became so popular that there are almost countless groups in Japan now. It's almost like marching band in the US. Every community has their own taiko group. So now in modern times, women are allowed to drum, and more women are drumming. But from a power and equity point of view, it's very, very much male dominated. It's very hard to make a professional career as a woman in the taiko world today, even though 2/3 of taiko players are women. It's an interesting dynamic that we're trying to change with this film.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment. I find the cinematography astounding. Is there any advice on what to give directors?
That's all Carrie. I'm gonna let Carrie handle that because she is behind the gorgeousness.
Well, I had this was my first opportunity to work with a second camera for almost the entire film, and so I had Shiho Fukada in Japan helping me on with the camera, and then in America, Carolyn Mariko Stuckey. And I think part of the secret is in having that trust and access so that I get a chance to really convey the intimacy. And with intimacy, I think comes honesty and transparency. And so there was no artifice here. It was all very, very real. And I think there's a lot of beauty in everyday life. And I just feel really grateful to have been able to roll enough to just catch the entire journey in a cinema verite way, so that we didn't have to rely on interviews to tell our story.
The score is also beautiful. Is there any advice on how to integrate music into the films?
That's a good question that I've been asking myself with every film that I make. But I think with this particular film, we worked with a composer named Mealy Hay, and she's based in Australia, in the Blue Mountains outside of Sydney. And we found her through a women's composers website. But I think that, I interviewed a lot of composers, and she got it. She got what the film was about. She saw herself in the film. And particularly, I think seeing yourself in something, I knew that her emotions were connected with the emotions of those who are on screen. And so, you know, when she's scoring a scene, it's about elevating the emotion in whatever direction it needs to go, or pulling back. You know, there was a lot of give and take there. And so, and Mealy was wonderful. She would score just one scene and then try to figure out, you know, what our style was. She spent a lot of the time listening and then reflecting back what she thought we heard. Yeah, we had a wonderful experience with her. And then eventually, you know, she recorded it with live instruments, at least half of it. We weren't able to get a full orchestra, but we got the instruments. And yeah, and actually we just had a sound mix done and did some tweaking and bringing in her music even more in certain scenes and pulling it back a little bit. And we talked about that. And really it was about, is the music in service to the emotion? And yeah.
Have taiko drums been used in live action films?
Yes, I'm seeing that more and more. Taiko drums being in commercials, being at like live award ceremonies, and being used in film scores. Certainly, I can always recognize it when I hear them. There's a natural drama and excitement and energy that taiko drumming brings. And so, yeah, it's a very visceral, energetic, dynamic art form, and I'm hoping that it becomes more and more popular as people get to see it.
It should. It's really awesome.
Thank you.
The conversation that y'all had at the 20-minute mark, it warmed my heart. Is there any advice you can give to couples?
Can you just remind me the 20-minute mark?
20 minutes in. I'm trying to remember what happened 20 minutes in. I'm going to pull it up on Vimeo right now. Also briefly note though about the music that was one of the challenges and joys of composing, is that Mealy was trying to figure out how to compose music around taiko, which has a very specific feeling and a very specific, you know, like rhythm that is not standard to your film scores. And so, you know, choosing, for instance, not to put drums for the most part in her score, because we already got a bunch of drums. But I think she was very complimentary. Okay, 20 minutes in. Oh, are we talking about just before they went to Japan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a conversation in the kitchen between Jen and Tiffany.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, Tiffany is, you know, a lot at the heart of this whole project, because you know, it was me talking with her that really opened my eyes to sort of the gender inequity in taiko, in that I know that she's this trailblazer in taiko and has been doing what she's been doing, you know, performing taiko all over the world for years. But we were having drinks after a concert and she said, you know, at the beginning, I get it. It's like me and the guys. That's my whole life, being on stage with me and the guys.
20
And
years
then,
ago.
yeah. And then now 20, 30 years later, I thought there would be more of me. How come there aren't more of me? And, you know, Tiffany is an incredible talent, but that question of like, where's that next wave? What's blocking them? What's getting in their way? How can we smash that barrier down? That's kind of the whole impetus behind the Heartbeat movement, the Heartbeat concert, the Finding Heartbeat film, is this idea of just pushing aside anything that's getting your way so that you can be fully yourself, that you can share your talent, your voice with the world, whether it's in taiko drumming or something else. So it really, again, it just started from a conversation and just sitting around and talking about just how hard it is to be an artist and making a living wage. You know, it's just, sometimes it's excruciating. And to do that year after year, you really have to lean into your community of other artists to stay inspired, to stay supported, to remind yourself of why we're doing what we're doing. You can't do it alone, you know. So that's one thing I loved about this film, is the way it built community, both on screen and off screen, for the women at the center.
The leadership quote about the top being a lonely place hit really hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
What did you
Yeah.
get out of it?
I just related to that. Anytime you're at the front of something, right? You're pushing it forward. You're trying to keep everyone energized. You're trying to, keep and hold the big picture of it all together. It's exhilarating. It's a privilege, and it's utterly exhausting. And it can be really isolating. And that's again, one of this thing about like bringing all these extraordinary leaders. Each one of them were their own visionary leaders in their field, like creating their own communities, but then bringing together when they can actually have a peer of leaders, of people who absolutely know what it's like to keep pushing that boulder up the hill. I think it was quite wonderful and quite a special thing, because usually everyone's just isolated in their corner just trying to make their thing happen, and it's hard to like pop up and look above the trees and see, oh, there's a landscape, there's a world of people trying to make these things happen, and how much better if we can converge our energy together and inspire one another. And that's one thing too, that every moment I've spent with Carrie and Don with this film has been inspiring, because these two artists are doing that in the film world, and they've been doing it for years and years as well. And so the synergy of this piece just came from every angle, I have to say.
Can I throw in there too that I think that what one of that conversation in the kitchen with Tiffany and Jen, one of the things that was really important to me as a mother was that conversation about what are your goals? What do you want to hit? And there are times in your life where it's very hard to put everything into being this top performer. And so Jen's like, my goals are here, so I'm able to do all these other things, like being a parent, like and I feel like that's the case with any person who's in the creative field, that there are things that I don't do right now because I have two littles, and it's a choice I made. And wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to make that choice? But that's the reality that we're in right now.
Can you talk more about the Hana Hachijo drums?
Hana Hachijo?
That's Chieko's piece.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a piece that she created out of frustration of not being able to drum on stage. And then that
being
piece,
excluded, yeah.
Right? Excuse me. And then that piece became so popular worldwide, it basically it guaranteed her position and her status, because even though within Japan it was very difficult to get on stage, once she created this piece and the world saw it, everybody wanted it. Everybody wanted her to teach. Everybody wanted her to perform. So she created her own unique value in a world that didn't value her before. It's utterly amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Solly, when we were in Japan and I was filming Chieko teaching at Kodo, there was one woman in the room, and I commented, well, there is this woman student here at Kodo. And at that time, when we were filming, Chieko said, yes, but they won't really let her perform on stage. And so she's doing all of this training and all of this work, but she's not necessarily going to have a future. And a year later, the tide had turned, in part because of our film, and Kodo was starting to put her up and lift her up and put her in the center of the stage in their productions. And so I think that we had an impact even on Kodo, the most prestigious school and place for Taiko in Japan.
I love the way that you integrated the family aspect with your wife, concert, and the trip to Japan. And I love how those are, like, integrated seamlessly to one another. Is that artful choices?
Well, I will say that, that fits back with that piece of why, one of the reasons that Jen and I connected right in the beginning, right, is, besides the 20 years of friendship, in a current stage in life, it was
career, family.
career, family, Yeah, and how do you do all of it at the same time? Do you integrate your child into the work that you're doing, or do you have two separate worlds that like run parallel? And I feel like there's a constant choice that's being made about how those worlds interact and how they don't interact. And so for me, I was also very inspired by Jen's family, and that Josie is a part of that Taiko world. That, you know, everybody knows Josie at those events, and, you know, sometimes Josie drums. We did not see that in the film, but sometimes Josie drums. And, you know, how beautiful it was to include that family element into your art, so they don't have to be two separate worlds. So the film is, I think, attempting that in some ways in the editing.
One thing that was quite lovely for me, that was a gift, is that after that whole year of 2020 that everybody just wanted to write off and forget about because it was so traumatic, my daughter and I were, you know, reminiscing about what a tough year it was and all these things and having to be at home for school and this and this and that. But she said, but we got to do her beat. And that was her bright light of the year. And that made me so, oh my God, that made me so grateful that for her, that was a highlight and not like, you know, the opposite, where as a mom, I'm afraid of, oh, we were gone so much and we didn't spend as much time with you during that time. And maybe you felt neglected, blah, 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 blah. But instead for her, you know, she felt a part of it and she thought it was special and she had really happy memories about it. So I was very relieved.
Nice.
How many people were a part of that production?
Performers?
Yeah.
There were 18 performers of her beat artists, plus a half a dozen or more Enso Daiko local artists that joined, plus a half a dozen designers, lighting, set, costume designers, another half dozen backstage crew, and then Carrie, how many did you have on your crew that night?
Well, on the night of the concert, we had 5 cameras rolling.
Yeah, so we had a pretty big company that evening for the concert.
Plus the audio recorder.
Yep.
Yes, 6. Yep.
Awesome. Was there an effect that COVID had on the set?
On the set, well, I think at the time, Carrie, Don, we were just living it with everyone else, and I don't think we fully understood what was happening until hindsight.
For
you know, like it was just, oh, lots of people are getting sick. Let's hope it's the flu. And then, you know, right after, when the COVID shutdown came, right after we finished wrapping the concert and the filming, thank goodness, it was sort of a miracle. We were still worried about getting performers back to their home countries, and that they were, you know, that we were worried that they might not make it, you know, because flights were being canceled left and right. So it was a shock, I think, for everybody. That, and at the time, I don't think we realized what a precious bubble we were in of timing. But yeah, Carrie, you probably could speak to that more.
Yeah, I think that every day was a new revelation, and it was just the period of discovery. And so March 2nd was, we had the performance February 29, and then the next day we had the final circle where everybody wrapped up and had a chance to have a heart circle with one another and talk about how the performance had affected them and where they were at. And then the next day everybody left, and then like 5 days later the world shut down, and we really didn't see that coming. Even at March 2nd, we didn't realize how lucky we were to be wrapping. But, you know, considering that we had been on a 2-year journey, if our performance had been scheduled for 10 days later, we wouldn't necessarily have a film, or we would be trying to reschedule the performance and still wrap up our film now.
I don't know why I love the quote, either we all have COVID or we all have the flu, but I'm good. Can you explain more, like, some of the situation more?
Well, like I said in the film, that one member, went to the doctor and she said that she had a very specific strain of the flu that was going around at the same time, like, which made it even more confusing because there was a nasty strain of the flu going around. COVID was just entering sort of the lexicon of reference and understanding. And as a director producer, I'm like, it's the flu. It has to be the flu. Keep going. This has to be the flu. The result is the same. People were dropping left and right. But in terms of my brain could not afford the possibility of it being anything else.
Well, they weren't testing for COVID at that time
Right, you
either.
couldn't get a test. There was no way to know. And in fact, I had to bring a few players to the urgent care, and nobody was testing for COVID or even the least bit concerned about it at that time. They were just like, oh, we've seen a lot of people. This is a nasty flu, and they would give you something to treat the flu.
But out of the 18 of us, I think 14 of us got sick.
Oh.
Including Carrie.
Oh.
Yeah.
Little Josie stole the show every second that she was on screen. Is there any,
Oh, thank you.
Exactly.
is there any advice that you can give future parents or anyone in the audience?
Oh, is that enjoy every second of it because they grow up so fast. Yeah, like this film honestly was a special gift to me in that I could capture this moment of time of Josie at a certain age, and you forget all the little details sometimes as you kind of, keep up to the pace of your daily lives, and suddenly she's 12 and practically a teenager, and I forget that special time where she was at that age in the film, and it was this wonderful gift, this wonderful reminder of like a moment in our family's life that like is it's priceless, honestly, like to have that.
I would also say that Josie was incredible on camera in the sense that, like, I think that before we first filmed with her, you must have had a conversation with her that was like, there's going to be cameras coming. Don't look at them. I don't know what you said to her, but we showed up at the house and she just rolled with it. I have never filmed with a child who hasn't like mugged for the camera. Like the camera comes in, they're like, hi, oh, ooh. And Josie was just like, hey. And she moved on with her day and lived like, this was totally normal to have these wacky ladies running around with cameras and microphones. And, that I was just like, Josie is a special kid to be able to pull this off the way she's doing it.
Yeah, I think it caught her a little bit before the making my own videos on TikTok phase. So if you did it now, she might be preening a little bit more for the camera. But yeah, it was great because she really was just being a kid.
Yeah. Overall, I was inspired by the film. I hope this film sends a message that little girls can live out their dreams no matter how big they are.
Yay, thank you.
Yes,
Where can we follow you? On Instagram or something?
Finding Her Beat. We're on Instagram, Facebook, findingherbeat.com. And then we are, hitting the festival circuit hard. We've got so many festivals lined up, like a dozen this fall already. So yeah, we're hoping to be everywhere we can be so that you can see this film.
We're very excited to premiere at Mill Valley.
This is probably a dumb question, but do you have the drums laying around? Can you play something?
You know what? I have drums around, but I would be hard pressed to play anything in my little sunroom right now. I would need a little more space. But next time I'll prep and have some drums nearby.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I ran out of questions. I'm sorry.
Oh,
That's
no
great.
problem. That's
Thank you so
awesome.
much. I appreciate your support
This
of
was
this
a fun
film so much.
conversation.
Yeah. Have you ever played or tried taiko drumming before?
No.
It's super fun. Where do you live?
Georgia.
Georgia. Trying to think if there's taiko groups in Georgia. I'll have to search. I know they're in most states, but not all states. So I will take a look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere we can buy them? Like online?
Oh, yes.
The drums?
You can go to Kadon, KADON.com, and they have both instruments and online lessons for you to learn taiko virtually anywhere you are. There's also Asano Taiko US, where you can buy drums through their website. And there's a few local, different local taiko makers as well. Otherwise, you can go to Japan if you have a lot of money and bring back a beautiful piece of art as well.
Cool. It was nice meeting with y'all.
It was nice meeting with you too. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Sally.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You bet.
Thank you so much, Sully. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.
Interview you guys and watch the film.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, thank
Yay.
you.
Have a great afternoon, Sully.